We're riding bees, we're making a beeline, we're forming beer, we're also going into the dungeon of World of Warcraft. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dungeons of the War Within. Each zone is coming with 2, so we'll do 2 in each video as they release more content on the alpha. And please, for the love of God, Blizzard, invite more people, because I've been waiting over 2.5 hours in each queue to do some class testing, and it sucks. A reminder, PreachCon 2024 tickets go on sale on Saturday, the 4th of May, 8 PM UK time, 2-day event. Your favorite content creators. We're going to have gaming competitions, cosplay competitions. We're going to have a whole bunch of stuff for you, and I can't wait to meet you in real life. Let's get into it. Let's start with one of my favorite dungeons so far, the Cinderbrew Monastery, or the Cinderbrew Meadery is actually what it's called. It's all about beer. If you've played, of course, Mists of Pandaria, you know that beer is a very big deal in this game, and whenever Blizzard has chance to mess around with beer, they tend to have a lot of fun. This dungeon is full of puns, it's full of silliness, and it's exactly the kind of fun that you expect from a dungeon, mixed with some really good mechanics to keep you interested as well. The layout of the dungeon, very simple, nice big open room that then leads off in a sort of linear fashion. You go one way, you clear that, you come back, you go the other way, and then you come back, and then you fight the last boss. But what we've got here is the first boss, Brewmaster Aldir. Very simple mechanic here, unless you have no mobility. We're going to fight a boss. He's got some pretty general mechanics, but then he's going to go immune to damage. And all around the pub, which is where you're fighting, is people are going to start getting angry. And the only way you can satiate their anger is to feed them more beer, or they're going to join the fight as ads. The achievement is pretty obvious here. Is what happens if you don't feed them beer? They'll get angry. So you have to grab a beer off the bar, hightail it across the room, feed some of these angry red patrons a beer. They will then relax, come back, and then the boss will return to action, and then you can fight it. As always, these are normal mode dungeons, so don't expect them to look particularly difficult, because they're not going to be. That will come when Mythic Plus testing comes. I like this fight. Nice, simple introduction to the main central hub of the dungeon. The only time I've ever not taken part in the brew delivery, besides the one patron that's right next to the bar, is if I'm on something that is just horrid at mobility, and I'm stood around looking at monks and feral druids, and even DKs now, if they're using Riders of the Apocalypse, to be able to go and distribute all this beer. I'm not going to do it. There's also this weird point where, certainly in the early days of the dungeon, where nobody knows what the hell is going on, and they just stand around and hope somebody else will get it done. That's not really going to happen. It's not really going to happen, so you've got to be aware of that. But after that, we're going to move on to the next boss, IPA, or IPA. IPA, as it's called, again, full of puns. This boss is actually spawned by clearing most of the trash in the room, and it will all gather together. You will get the Stormstout Brewery sort of vibe as to what's going on in here, for those of you who did Mr. Pandaria. And then you will gather the boss up, and IPA will spawn. This boss is the one that has wiped us the most. I wasn't quite sure what it did. The actual mechanics are very, very simple. You will defeat the DPS the boss until it phase changes, and then it will spawn a bunch of bubbling beers that will chase after it. And if they get there, they will give it an immense shield. Like, if you don't DPS any of these, he will get a shield that is pretty much equal to his entire health bar. We definitely had a pull where the boss was on 1% as he spawned the shield, and we just had to kill the boss again. Interestingly enough, you can fully CC these things. They don't pop up on the in-game nameplates. This will be fixed with like add-ons when they're in the game, but they wander around. You can slow them, you can grip them, you can do all kinds of things to CC them and kill them. If you don't kill them though, they will enrage and charge the boss and explode and just kill you. Something we found out kind of painfully. But this would be great for Mythic Plus. Some kiting paths, some control can be put in, making sure you can see the Mythic Plus elements here. It's like, okay, a semi-organized group will be able to manage these effectively and get a good control over them and probably not ignore them, certainly on Tyrannical. Otherwise, they're going to enrage and kill you, but you can manage them all. I like it if they have ads and things that are just fully CCable, so you can utilize all your class abilities. Nice fight. Very good. The next one is up to Benk Busby. Benky Busby. Yeah, Benky Busby, a little goblin friend, is going to be joining the fight. Benk is a tricky one because I didn't understand anything about this fight in normal mode. Like, from killing it like 5 or 6 times, I still was not really clear. For me, it was like killing a boss that just needed a ton of AoE, and that's really not the case with Benk. Benk actually is a giant room that looks like it's full of trash beforehand, and you can clear that out. Often it gets ninja pulled. But what you'll see is a ton of bees like joining the fight, like an absolute immense amount of bees that you'll want to AoE down. And then if you leave this fight going too long, all the barrels and stuff in the room will like erupt. And so we've been either murdered this boss into the floor, or it's nearly just eradicated us completely. So I didn't understand what the hell was going on visually. I like to take in the dungeons visually before reading like the dungeon journal or something. Can I figure out what this wants to do? The actual mechanic is you can ride the bees. I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea. You can get on the bees and you can charge into the barrels to destroy them, which will stop them erupting and killing you. That's the mechanic here. It took me a while to find it. And somebody, I'll be honest, someone told me, is like, well, you're supposed to ride the bees. I'm like, ride the bees? I've just been AoEing everything. Like, yeah, you're supposed to ride the bees and turn the barrels off. Again, a little bit of fun, little side mechanic. Who will get assigned to this? I have no idea. Could be healers, could be tanks, could be whatever, while you're defeating the boss down. But that's the idea, is you AoE down, you kill some of the bees, and then you can ride on the bees and demolish all the barrels. And this, again, will be, in Mythic Plus, a coordinated effort to make sure things work. After this, we're going to make a beeline. Literally, you're going to ride bees in a line, and it's called the beeline, up to the final boss, Goldie Baron Bottom. This is, interestingly enough, kind of like the simplest fight in here. Weirdly enough, this is one of the it's odd. This happens a couple of times in War Within Dungeons, as the last boss mechanically is actually seemingly the simplest, but I assume this is going to ramp up very heavily as the fight goes on. But very simple mechanic is we're going to kill some bees beforehand, and then Goldie's going to join the fight, and essentially just assign people with like an arrow to blow things up in the room, and then they will do less damage to you. Other than that, it's like a DPS fest. Yeah, nothing special to say about this one. I'll be interested to see when we go to Mythic Plus as to how this fight sort of ramps up, because so far it is seemingly the one that needs the least coordination, because the game very clearly points at what you should be doing. Although you will see in the footage, most people just don't do it. But that's also partially, I have no idea what's going on. And two, it's normal mode. It doesn't actually matter. Nothing's really going to kill you unless you royally screw up. But so far, Cinderbrew Meadery, I'm going to call it Monastery because it reminds me of Stormstout, is that it's really fun. Like, I was giggling and laughing. The mechanics, this is like Blizzard having a good time. And you can feel that. You can absolutely feel that Blizzard is having a good time with this. Vice versa, let's head over to the second dungeon they gave us, which was the Rookery. I would describe this, I'm sorry Blizz, I know you put so much effort in, but as Dungeon the Dungeon. It is extraordinarily basic. There's nothing much we haven't seen before, but there's also like some very nasty trash in here that is probably just going to kill you. I can already feel this is like the dungeon people are like, okay. The Rookery has only 3 bosses in it, and some just big healthy trash mixed with low health trash, which is always like a weird combo to have in there. So we got Kyrios as the first boss, just a birdie that's floating around the room, and it's the same as mechanics you've seen probably a dozen times before in dungeons. Is you have a period of time where you can DPS it, and then the birdie will fly to the middle and do something, and only ranged can attack it, and it will do some sort of mechanic. In this case, it's a big laser. This big laser probably needs reworking in some way. It seemingly is entirely random as to what direction the laser starts. And it spins pretty quickly, to be fair. It spins quite fast. You can obviously, if it's near you, move to the left of it. It seems to move clockwise or anti-clockwise every single time. But it either like starts on your group, in which case somebody's probably going to get hit. And even on normal mode, this thing will kill you. It stuns you and does immense amounts of damage. And I've seen people die to this regularly. Or it just starts on like the other side of the room and nobody needs to do anything. And you're just sort of hanging about waiting for the boss to come back. It should always start within some range of the group so there is something to do. Rather than like, oh, it started on the side of the room. Well, I guess I just like, put my feet up and grab myself a drink while this thing spins around in the room. So yeah, weird initial boss to get going with. Didn't think much of it, to be honest. So following Kyrios, we're going to go over to Stormguard Goron. Stormguard Goron is a fight I think is going to be horrific on Mythic Plus. I kind of meme on this boss, but yeah, this is really nasty. It actually reminds me, I forget the name of the dungeon, there was like a big Vrykul guy in Dragonflight who had like a hook and things like that. It reminds me of that boss. He's just in the middle of a very sort of like horizontal, oblong room, a rectangular room. And he has several voidy mechanics that go along with him. Usually he's going to be like making a void pool around him, then shooting off like void tornadoes which can hit you. And then he's got like a dragon which is going to explode. Those kind of things you've seen before. But he does have a mechanic where you're passing around a debuff. This is where you tend to see pugs fall apart with mechanics like this, because you have this sort of like void disease circle around you, and when it expires, it jumps to another person, and you could easily control this by just being the closest person to it. I didn't find this a problem, but this is the same sort of mechanic we've seen in like Raden, you know, mechanics like I've done a million times in raids, so for me it was very obvious, but I have seen people just like run around with it, like am I supposed to detonate over here, because it's got the same detonation circle, that kind of thing, and then it just moving off, and then that running in, melee just like stopping fighting and just moving away instead of being like, oh, okay, I can stay in melee and just pass it to the next melee along, like we were doing quite a number of bosses. So it'll be interesting to see how the community feels about this one. It's very easy, obviously, on normal, but you can, again, you can see the feeling that this thing is going to get real goddamn nasty. But that takes us to the next dungeon. Now, I'm not talking much, like, compared to the Meadery of, like, what's in the dungeon. It's kind of plain Jane, honestly. It's not, like, a spectacular dungeon. It's not funny. It's got, like, relatively normal mechanics, at least from me. But I will say this is my opinion, and there are several people who I played with, certainly that I didn't know, that weren't friends, that, like, preferred this to the other one, because the other one had too much going on. Fair enough. Final boss is a big boy. Very, very big boy, like we're used to seeing when we have these giant bosses. Now, I didn't, once again, the actual mechanic of this dungeon, I didn't really know until it went completely wrong. It's Voidstone Monstrosity is what it's called. And the general idea here is you're fighting him and he has a frontal cone on the tank, and you have debuffs of pools that you can drop, which has some area denial. And you can stack them, you can overlap them, you can do the usual stuff you would do there to control the room. The other mechanic is it'll spawn 3 ads. Now, seemingly it spawns these around a player, which means you can control them. We'll probably control where they are and get them right in the grip of where you want them to be. I actually feel the mechanic of this is you will be together, and then the mechanics will go out and then you'll spread, but then you'll come back together to control the ads. Because if the 3 ads spawn on normal, if you don't kill these, and every time I did this boss, they died, no matter where they were. So if a mage was stood miles away and spawned these 3 ads, they killed them on their own. Mythic Plus, that's not going to happen. If you leave these alone, these turn into really nasty enemies. Really nasty. I've only ever seen it once, and it was bad news bears, if that happens. Bad news bears. So it's just a case of control the ads, DPS the ads, DPS boss, eventually boss dies. Nothing much else going on. A little bit of control needed here. This is, again, a fight that if these pools are permanent, which I think they are, will start to fill this room. Like, it could get very, very technical at higher keys as to managing your space and control of the group, which is what you want. When you get into Mythic Plus, it's like, okay, let's take this to a next level, and now we need to think a little bit about where I'm standing, where I'm going to drop these things. Do I have mechanics that allow me to, like, run into the old pool and drop the old pool on top of each other? Kind of fun. It's just, it doesn't stand out. There's nothing in here that I was like, that is really cool. I didn't get that vibe. So those are your first 2 dungeons. I'll show you the next ones as soon as they're available.